The reality is we are not born with anxiety. There is a tiny, tiny chance that you may have an anxiety strand somewhere in your DNA. But to have it to the levels that people have now is ridiculous. And people literally believe that they have anxiety. So therefore, as we said before, as you sow, so shall you reap. If you believe you have anxiety, guess what you're going to get? Anxiety. And then you've got the kids, unfortunately, that turn around and say, oh, well, this is normal. This is normal. BS. It's not normal. I've transcended the church. I've gotten past what the church is teaching because in my view, it lacks depth. I mean, it's like a teardrop in an ocean. And when you really get into it, it's like, wow, there is so much more out there.
Hey everyone, welcome to Pursuit of Infinity. I'm your host, Josh, and today I am joined by John Morris. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
It is a pleasure, Josh. Thank you so much for having me. It's really fantastic to be here and looking forward to it.
Definitely, man. Being in this sort of like psychedelic, spirituality, consciousness space in podcasting, I get a lot of people who reach out to me and that I reach out to that are life coaches, behavioral and mental coaches and spiritual developers. So let's start off by I just want to ask you, how do you differentiate yourself in terms of your work? Because you describe yourself as a spiritual behavioral mentor, basically. So
yeah.
How do you define that? And then how do you differentiate yourself from everyone else within that space?
I think my honest answer is, and it's probably not a popular one, I feel I'm probably one of the last genuine sort of mentors out there. I mean, I very rarely ever call myself a coach, a guru, anything like that, because it seems like they are literally on every street corner. There is more of gurus in India than there is traffic lights, and that's a statistical fact. But for me, it's always been a genuine thing. And wherever I've gone, whether it's been the Los Angeles Tribune, whether it's been Mupo Entertainment, whether it's whatever it is, the phrase that's always gone around with me is, this guy's a breath of fresh air. If you find something that isn't right or is left of center, I'm not afraid to raise that and say, well, why is this, like this? And it may not make you popular with the people you're working for, but I think it is really important to be, especially in this day and age, again, above reproach, ethical, moral, and actually have a standing that's there. It's not saying, hey, I'm perfect, look at me. It's saying, hey, I've gone through this. Let me show you, my story and let you prove to you that I know what I'm talking about. But I think for me, the separation honestly comes because a lot of coaches that I saw out there when I was running Mind, Body, and Soul, there were people out there that were saying, well, I'll get you free of anxiety. I'll get you free of anxiety. And I pick on anxiety in particular because in my book, I talk about this. I break it down, literally in one page. Because it's insanely simple, actually, to get over anxiety. And we can go into that. I'm happy to do that. But the reality is these coaches that were claiming, I'll get you free of anxiety, in their private messages with me were saying, oh, I'm so anxious, I'm so anxious, I'm so anxious. And I'm like, hang on a second, you're doing the very thing that you're trying not to. So for me, I think it's always important to, if you're putting out there, I've done this, look at me, you've got to have that backup, especially in this day and age. Whereas a lot of these people were like, I'll get you free of this, but I can't do it myself. And again, it goes back to, those who can, do, and those who can't teach. So it is really interesting for sure. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's for me how I differentiate myself. I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to what other people are doing. I kind of feel more than anything guided to do certain aspects of business and to do certain aspects of life. And oftentimes it's putting the information out there, oftentimes for free. And then people get in touch with me and are just like, wow, you changed my life, by what you said, about what you did. And, that's a super cool thing, just to have that impact on somebody. And then it tends to progress from there.
Yeah, absolutely. You can oftentimes tell the types of people who are just putting out their ideas without having done the work themselves.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you can tell that by a person explaining exactly what you should do, saying,
Yeah.
this is the method, this is the only method. You can't follow any other method
Yeah.
because they're a particular practitioner of whatever they're advertising
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. Well, let's touch on that just briefly because I think it's really interesting point that you brought up. Um, so you can tell, I think, a genuine mentor, coach, whatever, from a charlatan, basically, as I was going to put it politely. And there's two real ways. The first one is the real coach. You can ask them, to speak on whatever topic it is. If it's, mind, body, and soul, and they can give you bang. They can give you a full blown thesis on it, in as much or as little detail as you want. They know what they're talking about. That's how people develop confidence as well. You know what you're doing, you know what you're about. The other thing is as well is, and this is something I've found, obviously we talked a little bit off air and Christian and I were talking about this, shout out to Christian, literally that the majority of people now that I see in the life coaching industry are just repeating the same things, verbiage. They're spewing the same detritus out that came from the 1910s and the 1930s. There was seemingly a massive spiritual movement that happened in the 1900s, 1910s, 1930s, 1920s. You had some phenomenal teachers out there. And now you see and hear the same people that are just like, right, I'm going to spew this out. I'm going to spew that out. And you can tell when someone is just, spewing forth what they have already heard, or if somebody has genuinely been impacted by it, changed by it. You can tell by the emotion in their body. You can see, obviously, here, I'm moving around a lot. I'm animated. Whereas other people that are just spewing it out, it's very stuttery. It's very, and those are red warning and flag signs to me.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Speaking of other people, other mentors, teachers,
Yeah.
what were some of your inspirations? Some people who you sort of modeled your belief systems and teaching styles off of?
So early on, because I went through a spiritual transformation again in sort of 2021. And prior to that, I would say, a lot of people from, the Catholic and Christian sort of movements, people like Brennan Manning, people like Joyce Meyer, Charles Stanley, people who had actually gone through an experience. And I found myself drawn to these people, again, but now, I mean, it was people like Wayne Dyer, Florence Scovel Shinn, Earl Nightingale, Jesus, the Buddha, basically there was so many people that were brought into my path that was like, wow. And then when I got more and more into business, because I've been in business now for the last 20 years, but when things really clicked for me more so in this year, it was amazing when you start to see the false prophets, as they were. They belong in a category by themselves that are revered by the world and that are absolutely loved by the world, to nobody's surprise. And then they started moving out of the way, again, almost divinely off my radar. And you had people like Mark Tilbury, and you had people like Alex. I forget his last name. Big muscle guy, big beard. Reminds me of Mike Myers. I forget his name. But again, and all these genuine people were there, and you could feel that they were genuine because a lot of the life coaches just want to make a living off making you feel lousy. And again, there was five people specifically in that category who anytime I see any of their content, I'm like, report, ban, block, get off my radar, don't want to hear from you, don't want to see you, because at the end of the day, they just literally drain your soul. And again, unfortunately, they are revered by so many. But yeah, there are a lot of really awesome teachers out there. I think to anybody who's looking, I would say don't necessarily, go looking. Just watch these people come into your life because they do come in for a reason, and you might be surprised who it is. But just kind of go with it.
Yeah, I agree. And it almost seems that there might even be utility to some of those people because it's almost like they introduce certain
Yeah,
people, like they introduce
yeah,
maybe myself or you
yeah.
to this type of work. And it seems to me that, at least with me, what happened in the beginning of my path was seeking out some of these teachers, and then you sort of graduate past them, moving
Correct.
on to other teachers. Sometimes you still go back to those original
Yeah.
people who showed you the way and initially broke you through
Hmm.
the barriers that allow you to explore spirituality, consciousness,
Yeah.
and all these things. But it does seem that if you're progressing in the right way, at least in my view, you should be sort of leaving some of the old behind
Yeah.
and venturing out into some new teachers.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It all got started for me really in 2021 because I'd worked for the church for 15 years. I'd left under just horrible circumstances when I saw the political stuff that was going on and politicking that was happening and all this other stuff. And I left with a really bad taste in my mouth about it. And it wasn't just even one church. Like that's the thing. It's like even family and my immediate family and stuff. They didn't want to believe what was going on, what I was seeing. But when they experienced it for themselves, it's like we can't ignore this because it hasn't just happened here. It's happened here and it's happened here. And eventually, I just got to a point where again I was in a really really bad place for probably about 5 years after I left, and you suddenly realize I was on a call the other day with a former BBC producer, and we were talking about this. Funny enough, and it's literally he and I shared the same path that we left where we worked, and it was amazing how that circle of friends just disappeared. Like they wouldn't take your calls, they wouldn't, and I mean we were in real dire straits. Um, and literally, 2021 January, I sat there. I was down in the old office and had my phone on, and for whatever reason, Wayne Dyer came on. Now, I'd never heard of Wayne Dyer, any of his teachings or anything like that before. He came on his everyday wisdom. I listened it for I think maybe 2 hours. I listened to it twice round, and all of that stuff was gone. All the anger, all the bitterness, all the rage. It was like just being baptized, anew and afresh. And I quickly realized that there was not necessarily another path, but there was possibly an advancing, and I think people are scared to say, I've transcended the church. I've gotten past what the church is teaching because, in my view, it lacks depth. I mean, it's like a teardrop in an ocean, and when you really get into it, it's like, wow, there is so much more out there. And I think that's really where I was on in the place that I had to be in at that point to come out the other side with so much passion and just like energy. And it was incredible. And like I said, some of the teachers that I encountered afterwards, again, it was different things and it opened my mind up to so much that and again, I always go back to Wayne Dyer whenever I'm feeling that little bit shaky or a little bit mentally, unstable or whatever. I always go back, and it's just that it's like that sudden serenity. And you tend to know the teachers that you need to listen to at the time. It's like a divine intuition.
So you said when you started listening to him, it sort of helped you to shed this, a lot
Yeah.
of the anger, the negative feelings that you were having. Can you pinpoint exactly where those negative feelings and the anger came from?
Oh, absolutely. And again, a lot of it was to the church. A lot of it was how I'd been treated or how I perceived that I'd been treated. A lot of it was from family who you expected to have your back at that time and didn't. I mean, I was really going down on a horrible, horrible path, and I tried so many times to get better. It's like the old addict thing, I try to get better, I try to get better, I try to get better, and every single time, you went back to drink, you went back to lust, you went back to whatever it was. And it was like the anger, it was ungodly. And I was hell to live with for myself, and very difficult for other people to be around. There'd been a number of things that had happened there. And I think the truths, quite honestly, with a lot of the church stuff. Like I worked for the church every single day for 15 years. And when I came back from the United States, I was basically made homeless by my best friend, who was a Christian. And, it was like, okay, well, the church will have my back. The church will help. No, they won't. Their exact response was, our response is, or our responsibility to you is to find you a room. It doesn't matter where that is, but that's our thing. So when you realize that nobody is going to pick you out of the situation except you suddenly realize that, God is with you in this situation, but it's up to you to do the work. He may take you to the well, but it's up to you to drink. And that was something that really became a prominent feature in my life, I started to become not necessarily more self-centered, but I think more independent more than anything else. And that had a massive impact. I had to go through all of that to really, really understand and to grow and to mature. And it wasn't without pain. Don't let anybody kid you. It really wasn't without pain because it isn't fun.
I love this concept of it being within you. That seems
Yeah,
to me to be the very first barrier to break through is to instead of looking externally for
yeah,
someone else to tell you what spirituality is,
mhm,
the real question is, who am I? That when
yeah.
you start to understand that and you start to get into that and you start to realize that these answers are actually found within
That's
and
it.
they're felt as opposed to heard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and again, people have asked me so many times, who was your counselor, who was your mentor, who helped you get through alcoholism, who helped you get through, breakdowns and whatnot. And I was like, no one on this planet, but there was a lot of people divinely placed, and each one had their part to play. But ultimately, it was for me to do the work, and I discovered that. And again, people that know me know that I am insanely productive. Like I get done in one day what it takes some people a month or even years to do, just because I'm very task orientated and I cannot sit still. Um, because at the end of the day, and it's an old Buddhist quote, and it goes something like this: the biggest lie that people believe is that they have time. And you don't. That's the thing. It doesn't mean that you got to rush around and do everything like an insane lunatic, but it does mean that if you got books that's on your heart to write, write them. Don't procrastinate. Don't sit there and try and figure out how everything's going to happen. I sat there and literally it flowed through me, out of me. In 11 days, I had the first write through of a brand new novel and an entire series that followed after that. And it is all inside you. And when you recognize that the greatest therapy is to go inside you rather than being told the answers, it's a massive thing because I firmly believe when you're told the answers, it doesn't mean as much as when you have to figure them out for yourself.
I'm so with you there. And my um, primary method of that has been psychedelics. They've been
Mhm,
just amazing for um, allowing my consciousness to explore other realities
mhm.
and other realms and being able to realize that, like, these things, this magic that is happening, this divine thing that I'm touching is actually within me.
Yeah,
And it's not just within me, it's within everyone else as well.
that's it.
Because I think a lot of people that are like avid churchgoers seem to think that unless you're following the Christian path, the Catholic path, whatever
Yeah,
that may be, that you're not on the right path. Like you're damned to hell, you're going to
yeah.
burn in the lake of fire, this and that. But I think one of the most important teachings of spirituality is that we're all divine.
Mhm.
Everybody has it within us.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And furthering that, I find it interesting when people say to me they're in a pursuit of truth. And of course, I'll bite the feed and whatnot. Tell me what your pursuit of truth is, and then they'll say, well, I'm studying the Bible, and I'm studying this theologian, and I'm studying that theologian. I was like, you're in pursuit of Christian truth. That is not the full picture. And people get really angry when you say that. And I'm like, well, answer me this then. In a God that's an infinite being, why would there be so many other religions? And again, they come back furious and again, really angry and people get angry. People love you until you challenge their views. And then as soon as you do that, people want to slay you. Look at what happened to Jesus. Look at what happened to the early Buddhas. Look at what happened to the early Christians. And that is the reality that for me, if something doesn't make you a better person, I don't care if you've got salvation or not, if it doesn't make you a better person, then what are you doing it for? And that's really where I was at. It was like, I've done the church thing, I was very good at it. Born again, I stood up there, again, and I haven't changed in terms of how I speak and communicate. That hasn't changed and been very spirit led. But I think what I have discovered is, you know, there is so much more than just what you see in this little bracket. And I'm sorry, but arguments like, well, Sunday isn't the place to preach a really amazing sermon telling people how divine they are and how special they are. And I'm like, Well, if Sunday morning isn't the time to do it, when is?
And I don't mean to like come down on Christianity and,
Mhm.
Catholicism.
No,
I
no.
know sometimes, the way that I talk about it, it does come off as like I'm a
Yeah,
Christian hater or something like that. I love the teachings of Jesus and I incorporate them into my worldview and my perspective of
yeah,
spirituality. But my problem comes when I'm having a conversation with a Christian, say, and they tell me that like my position on spirituality
yeah,
is not valid,
yeah,
and that is a problem because I think when you're having a productive discussion with someone, especially about the mysteries of the universe,
yeah.
we need to be able to validate one another so that we can hear each other, listen, and then incorporate our ideas into each other's paradigms.
I think as well, what I find when people are so willing to hold to their position, that concerns me greatly. And what I've found, unfortunately, and again, I'll be brutally honest, again, my experience, folks, a lot of people won't agree with this, but I found a lot of Christians to be very untrustworthy. And that's whether or not I've shared things with them privately and it's gone public, whether or not, you expect people and you hope people are going to be there at your darkest hour and they're not, whether you join a place and you need to find that place of healing and then there's a hidden agenda in what they're doing. It just, and this is the thing, and people will argue with me until they're blue in the face, whether it's family or extended family, and that's fine because it just further reinforces. I didn't go looking for this position, folks. It literally, I tried to ignore it for so many years that I was like, no, no, it can't be. It cannot be them. It has to be me. I have to be the problem. And then I got to a point in my life where I was like, why do I have to be the problem? Why can't it be that they're being this way? They're being political. And then when you listen to the teachings on a Sunday morning, I sit there and I'm just like, well, I don't sit there actually because I don't go. But I have sat there for many years and I was just like, this is designed as nothing more to control people. And again, I make no response, I make no apologies for saying these things because, as far as I'm concerned, they're very, very true. If you really go in deep, and it's not me being a Christian hater, it's not me being a religion hater. This has been my experience. Like I say, I was in it for 15 years. I was very, very good at what I did. Um, and I remember people telling me, I was like, you're going to have a problem with this minister because you're spirit led. And he isn't. He was an institutionalized guy. And there's a massive difference between being spirit led and being a church person.
Definitely. I know exactly what you mean by that. So before we sort of transition, because I want to really dig into what your like spiritual beliefs are now, how you've sort of transitioned and how that's changed. But I just have a question.
Go for it.
What has the church, Christianity, Catholicism, whatever your avenue was at the
Mhm.
time, how did that help you to get to where you are right now?
I think for me, when I saw what I perceived to be true, and I mean that the negatives largely, it forced me genuinely to say, well, again, like I say, it was a long journey. Um, it forced me to really say to myself, to my wife, to even extended family, to anyone who would listen, if this is what Christianity looks like, and this is what going to church looks like, and this is what a Christian looks like, I don't want any part of it because the majority were rude, obnoxious, angry, uh, genuinely hate filled. There was some, don't get wrong, that were phenomenal people, and I really, really, they were the people that would be there. But it was like the higher up the ladder, that the person was, it was like they could get away with anything and go to church on a Sunday morning and just be like, "Oh, hallelujah, I'm saved. Let's have a little boogie." And he just like, man, this is just not right. you know, and it genuinely propelled me. Like I say, I was at that point, where you know, mother and father-in-law absolutely hated the fact we weren't going to church. Didn't really want to know the reason we weren't going to church. It was just that's no reason to stop going to church. The fact that you'd been mentally abused, the fact that you had unlimited anxiety, the fact that you were heading down a severe alcoholic route to try and it wasn't even to try and deal with things; it was to try and numb me stupid. That you were having severe issues. And because it counteracted their beliefs and what they held near and dear, they didn't want anything to do with it. Eventually, and it didn't take long for this to happen, I got to a point where I was like, okay, they may hold to their point of view. They may hold to their brethren, they may hold to the evangelical, anything. Why then does that mean that I need to hold animosity towards them for who they are? And eventually I can say, you're not going to change. That's fine. That's on you. But for me, I release you because I don't want any more of it. And again, Christian and I talked about this, other shows have talked about this, that there was a lot of things that happened within the church. Again, people attempting to seduce you basically was one of the biggest things as a youth worker. And this is all stuff that you've got to deal with. And then, the Kirk session and your boss is just like, no, we don't want to hear about that. But as soon as you step out of line and say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, it's like, boom, and I quickly realized it's like, you're going to attack or you're going to attack the youth worker and the youth minister, but you're not going to attack, run to his aid or have a conversation with the people that are doing wrong. And there was a lot of double standards for sure. So like I said, to get to that point of seeing it for what it was, trying to ignore it for as long as I could and pretend that it wasn't happening. When you hear someone like Wayne Dyer and then you go on to Florence Scovel Shinn and you go into these other people who have very similar views, but there is something so much more about them, you're like, wow, this is a powerful thing. So I suppose in the way of surmising, it's literally a case of when you've gone as far down as you can go, the only way is to look up.
Yeah, it sounds like in a nutshell, you're saying similar to when people say, like, when they have bad parents.
Mm,
I've learned from my parents what not to do when I have
yes.
a child.
Yeah.
And as you said, shouts out to Christian Reeve, homie, friend of the show, who's been on a bunch of times. I've been on his pod a bunch of times. If anybody out there wants to get a full, in
Yeah.
depth, very amazing uh, story of what you went through during the church, detail for detail.
Yeah.
Go listen to Christian's podcast. You were just on it. It was great. There was a lot of stuff that you went into very, very deep about that. We don't have to get into all that today on our interview. But if anybody wants to hear about the full story
Yeah.
of your church experience, what happened, why you left, go listen to Christian's podcast. It's fantastic, as all his podcasts are. But why don't we transition a little bit into what your spiritual beliefs have evolved
Mhm.
into? I like to ask the question, and it's a tough one. But whenever people talk about spirituality, the mystery, God, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, the first question people always ask is, "Do you believe in God? Do you believe in God?" Whatever. But I like to ask then, what is God? Because there are so many different explanations depending on whether or not you subscribe to a specific ideology or religion across the world. There's thousands of them. So I'll pose the question to you. What is God to you?
To me, quite honestly, he is the true definition of what a father should be. He is the true definition of what, yeah, a father, a parent should be. He is, to me, in certainly my experience of him, is like a person beyond this realm. Who is always tapped in, always listening, always, aware of what's going on. They're willing to guide at the drop of a hat. Um, you know, and I think that's it in a nutshell. It literally is someone who wants the absolute best for you. But unfortunately, in this world in which we live in, people tend to believe other things because when you can't explain something and people are looking for someone to blame rather than looking inwards, and again, I have to take share of responsibility for everything that we talked about in the first half of the conversation because I was allowing it to happen rather than saying, no, I'm not giving my power or whatever you want to, my control, over it. I was allowing that to go on. And that's been a phenomenal thing to learn as well. But in terms of God, he's the ever-present guide, transcendent. He is the one that literally, when I said, Lord, I want to be a millionaire, he didn't just wave a magic stick and say, oh, here you go, here's money raining from the sky. But he gave me the ideas in which I could start businesses with, in which we could start novels with, in which we could start doing some phenomenal things, and then connecting the dots. And the really cool thing is, we've just put a teaching out about this. When you look back on your life and you do it with open eyes, that means spiritually awakened eyes. You can see the breadcrumbs that led you to this point. Whether you've defined it as good, whether it looks and you define it as bad, you can see the breadcrumbs. And oftentimes it's the choices that you've made, the people that you've allowed into your life, the things that you didn't get out of. And the really cool thing about it is when you start looking at all that, it's like, wow, this is what's led me to this point. So a lot of the negative stuff that may be going on now can be great source material for the future, for books, for your courses, for life changes, everything that's there. I know I deviated a little bit there, but it happens.
Definitely, man. This is a vast and complex subject. But I noticed that uh, you refer to God as He. And
Yeah.
this might be a weird question, but can you explain why and what that means? Is that sort of like a Christian foundation of what God is?
I don't even know if it's a Christian foundation, but for me, he's always appeared as a man. God has never appeared as a woman. I've never, I've never felt comfortable with people, saying, well, you need to call God a woman. Why do you assign gender? Why this? Why that? Why that? And that's the problem. People ask why far too often. But for me, it's always been like, great grandfather. It's always been, a masculine. For other people, they've got other experiences, and that's fine. But for me, it's always been, you know, a yeah, it's always been masculine.
Yeah, I've experienced a lot of that as well. Again, as I said earlier, I've been able to connect with the divine through psychedelic
Mhm,
experiences. And it's really interesting because I'm not sure if it's sort of a confirmation bias, but it almost seems to me that I anthropomorphize the male aspect of God
mhm,
potentially because it's almost as if it's a higher version of myself and I am a male. So I think
mhm,
I do extrapolate, as above, so below sort of thing. But I've also experienced like the earth as
mhm,
God and like the universe as God. And sometimes when I experience like what I'll call like Mother Gaia or
mhm,
something, as I say mother, it does take on a sort of
mhm.
female aspect. So it almost depends to me on what your avenue of spiritual experience is. And it might present itself to you as a male, a female,
Yeah.
animal, a blade of grass, whatever.
I think the interesting thing is as well, especially in the time in which we're living in the 1800s, 1700s, 1600s, the form of God here in the westernized world would never even been considered as female. It's as you have the feminist movement, it's as you have the male toxicity stuff that's going on now, and a lot of the other things that are going on. That's why, and people very harshly are trying to push across their views. And again, like we said right at the beginning, whenever somebody pushes their views so harshly, immediately I'm like, no, you know. Again, I just close. I'm very peacefully, but I close the conversation down because I think when somebody is pushing their views that hard, there's something not right about it. When it's honest and genuine, you don't need to convince people. Like we're having a very nice conversation here now. And I've been on shows with people that have polar opposite views to me. And I tell them right at the beginning, you are under the illusion, my friend, that, what you believe, what you think, what you say in any way affects me. Because it doesn't. Because, again, and I think it's important to have that strength of character where you can say, I believe this. You believe this. Does what you believe affect me? No. Does what I believe affect you? No. Then why, again, why are we fighting about it? Why are we scrapping about it like little children? And if we are scrapping about it like little children, then is what we believe, A, as enlightened as what we believe it to be, and B, really worth believing? Because if it doesn't bring about that sense of peace and that sense of awe and wonder, then again, there's something in the fabric of it that is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, that aspect of awe and wonder being extremely important because
Yeah.
to me, this is ultimately a grand mystery and nobody knows. We all, like you said, you use the word belief, what we
Mhm.
believe. And that's really all it is. It's, from your experience, what do
Mhm.
you believe? Like, what does it mean to you? I'll tell you what it means to me
Yeah.
as a famous psychedelic practitioner Terrence McKenna said when he liked to talk to people about it, and about the mystery, he would say, "How does it cast its shadow into your life?" And that I
Yeah.
think is a beautiful way to look at it.
Yeah. Well, I think Emerson said it as well in, it may have been his book about independence, in terms of people being independent. And I think it was along the lines of, I paraphrase here, but you guys in the 1950s have had your experience of God. Now, how about you let the younger folk have their experience of God and don't try and force God into your box and into your. And that's one of the things that obviously you come up a lot of, which is, well, God, or it doesn't sound like God would say that. And it's like, well, why? Just because he hasn't spoken like that to you, it doesn't mean. And again, you watch people's lives. There are certain things that people do instantly that you're like, that ain't of God, even if it's divine. It isn't of God, or it looks very, very bizarre. But who am I to judge? But equally, when you watch other people's lives, it's like, yeah, that makes complete sense. And I think at the end of the day, I think we should do far more observation in our own lives and far less judging in other people's lives and trying to assume the God seat than we do, because people judge and they don't often know what's really going on.
Yeah, oftentimes they haven't done the work themselves.
Correct.
But you know what? Let's do a little judging today of our own. Because there is an objective morality to a
Yeah,
degree, in my opinion. I've
yeah.
been exploring this question quite a bit, whether or not our culture, our experiences, who we are, sort of plays into what our morality is. And if that's true, can you say that there is such thing as an objective morality? And what do you say to that, first of all?
I think first of all, you got to define what it is. Just backing up a little bit one of your previous statements, the difference between a belief and a knowing. And a belief is something that is handed down to you by your mom, by your dad, your grandparents. I mean, people are taught to hate, people are taught to, despise religion, to love religion, one way or the other. And knowing, and beliefs will always fail. It doesn't matter what it is. When you put the pressure on enough, beliefs will always fail. And knowing is something that you know fundamentally to be true. Like, I know the chair that I'm sitting on right now, and you can get into what is the color, blah, 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 all the existential things, but I know this chair is black. I know that I've got it boosted up as high as it'll go, creating a lovely backdrop and all that kind of stuff. That's a knowing. But with regards to your question about, again, the whole thing of conditioning, I think if I'm hearing you right and summing it up, I think probably do to a degree what I've done, which is, I mean, I'm like a hermit by choice nowadays. I work from home. I don't see a lot of the stuff that goes on the news. Anything I need to know, I'm going to hear. And I work with people all over the world, 7 days a week. So I think when you're in sort of the institutions, and by institutions I mean the schools, the workplace, the organizations that are there, you are going to be conditioned. One way or another. Now, I believe some people are, that's why they're meant to be. That's what they're meant to be doing. Not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur, so you should go to school. Not everyone is meant to be, a business owner, so you should be in a workplace. But you should know that if you're going to be in a workplace, you are going to be conditioned by those around you. Flip side of that is the kind of role that I do. Again, I can go sometimes months, without seeing another person aside from my wife and the cat. I'm completely fine with that because of the experiences that I've had. So when people say to me, "Oh, why do you cut yourself off?" It's like, because the experiences I've had made me made me want to do so. I was just like, I don't want to be around these people anymore. I'm probably a very sensitive person when it comes to that, and I'm very aware of these things. Um, Not like a lot of empaths then on the other side, because that's a whole other spectrum, which, I heard a quote, not long ago about an empath, and the severe empaths are fracturally or emotionally fractured people that end up doing more harm than good. I'm definitely not on that spectrum, but I'm definitely not on the spectrum where I have to surround myself with people. I try to remain central more than anything else, and that's why, to me, balance is key. But I think people can be very, very conditioned. That's why they call it a TV program or a radio program. So you got to become very aware what you're putting into your head, what you're surrounding yourselves with, who you're surrounding yourselves with, because your view of the world, your view of religion, your view of everything can be skewed. Again, you look at Nazi propaganda. And then you look at it from the other side of the fence. For years, decades. It's people have been conditioned, and people believe oftentimes what the majority believe because it takes more energy to think for yourself and draw your own conclusions than even if they're going to be that conclusion anyway. It takes more effort to do that than to actually just go with with what everybody else is saying.
Yeah, so what it sounds like you're saying is that morality can be conditioned, which
Yeah.
sort of brings up in me the idea of the conquest of empire
Mhm.
being the opposite of moral. And a lot of what you're seeing around the world in terms of the conflicts that are going on being objectively immoral.
Oh yeah. History is prime example of that. 9/11 and the cover up that was there, JFK, the cover up that was there. You can get into the conspiracy theories, but I genuinely believe that a conspiracy theory is only a conspiracy theory until it's proven true. And a lot of the times people don't want to believe what is right in front of them. Like, oh my goodness, could our government do this to us? Well, of course they could. The all the other stuff that's happened in UK British history. If you want to look closer to again, very bluntly, even the stuff that's going on in schools now with LGBTQI, all sorts of stuff that's going on there. I'm not afraid to talk about it, folks, because I think it has to be talked about, and from somebody to a degree who has dare I say, an air of authority about it because he's actually spent so many years studying it, working with the people, a psychologist in training, all of that kind of stuff. I'm not just a random, Joe that just comes along and says this stuff. So it absolutely can be, controlled. And morality, again, what is morality? If you go down that existential route, because the 1940s, morality was every German that was a Nazi was evil. Uh, when you understand a little bit more as to why people believed in the Nazi regime and the movement, because they were a country on their knees, and Hitler came and very subtly, as a great salesman did, fed them one thing after another and did the Trump thing, which was, I'm going to make Germany great again. You know, uh, it was exactly the same thing. And then he decided, right, well, I'm now going to conquer this and I'm going to conquer that. And I'm going, and on and on and on and on. You need to know history into order to really understand what is going on and what's happening. And that is another another problem that people just don't want to study. People don't want to know because ignorance is far more pleasant oftentimes than the realities.
Yeah, this is a great point. Understanding history, because so I'm not on TikTok, but I've heard rumblings of there being this movement on TikTok where people are taking Osama bin Laden's mission statement of why he attacked America,
Yeah.
and they are essentially saying that he was right to plan and carry out 9/11. And these are people who are young enough to where they weren't alive during 9/11, so they don't have that historical context. So as you said, understanding history is so imperative when you're trying to nail down what is and isn't right.
I think furthering that as well, because I hadn't actually heard about that. But what I would say, again, very controversial, um, would be very simple. That's under the assumption that Osama bin Laden actually did do the 9/11 stuff.
That's a good point because I mean that is a rabbit hole in itself.
Oh yeah.
Um, I mean whether or not he did it, planned it, he definitely had a
Oh,
part in it.
well, or again, figureheads. I genuinely believe, even now with the Andrew Tate movement, I genuinely believe that he is the figurehead, and you've got a ton of people behind him pushing. The fastest way to cover up any, immorality, act of oppression or anything like that, you get a figurehead. You get somebody that the public can hate. You see this in Iron Man 3. Get somebody that the public can absolutely hate, and you push that. Well, it's already come out that, the president and the prime minister at that time, they did things that were again, reprehensible. They did things that were disgusting. And then you sit there and say, well, hang on a second. Let's explore this a little bit. Let's look at the architecture of the trade buildings. Let's look at how they fell. Let's look at what actually happened. Let's look at even back to JFK and his shooting in Dallas. You know, the trajectory that Lee Harvey Oswald was meant to have done, the fact that it was a bullet from the other side, the fact that he was tried, executed within hours. There wasn't very much that was again. There was too many things that again was swept under the rug, and you start asking that question. And again, like a lot of people, I was like, nope, can't be that, can't be that. But then you see enough stuff that goes on where you have to actually say, could it be? Did genuinely Osama bin Laden do many of the things that, again, how do we know? Oh, we know because the media tells us so. Yeah, well, the media is really truthful, isn't it? So it's where you end. And I know this is really radical stuff for a lot of people to listen to. And I get it. I'm not going to be popular with some people because, again, they look at the media as law. They look at the media as God. I've been on interviews before where this kind of conversation made people very uncomfortable and made them sweat. But again, it's asking that question: how do we know that this actually happened? Because all we've got is TV, papers. That's at that time, not so much now, because now you've got the firsthand, videos and stuff. But again, with fake videos, it's like, well, where does this end? Is anything true?
Yeah, and as you said, things are only a conspiracy until they've been proven correct, and that's happened
Yeah,
many, many times through
yeah,
history. And when you start to look into the details of certain things, and you have to ask yourself, like, why are there so many loose ends?
yeah.
Why this? Why that? And I mean, this goes for every single major event that has ever happened
Yeah.
to the Western world. There's always something weird about it.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, like, what's really going on here? Because it seems to me that the only thing we can be sure of is that we are not being told the full truth, if any of the
Mhm.
truth, via mainstream media. And this is, to me, this is exemplified so much further by this UFO disclosure movement. Have you been
Mhm.
keeping up with this that's
I
going on right
haven't.
now?
I've maybe heard maybe one or two rumblings around, but aside from that, not very much at all.
It's just super interesting because what's coming out is that our government has had back engineering programs where our tax dollars have been going toward,
Mhm.
and the Pentagon and the Department of Defense have essentially been blocking our elected officials as Congress from getting the information that would be able to that they would be able to then disclose to us, the taxpayers. So to me, that's the biggest issue here. Although a lot of people want to say like, and for me, it's super interesting. Oh, are there aliens? Are we alone? Is this some sort of an interdimensional aspect of reality that we can't perceive with the five senses that we've been given? But I think the place to start seems to be that our tax dollars are being used in ways that we're not being told, whether it be through UFOs or all kinds of black projects.
I completely agree. I mean, again, former wrestling legend Jesse Ventura, he exposed a lot of this on his show Conspiracy Theory. And again, initially you listen to it and you think, you watch the first episode and you're like, I've known of Jesse. I've worked, very, very blessed to have worked with, a decent number of wrestling folks and in the industry. And his is always a name that comes up. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll see what goes on. I've a relatively open mind that's attached to nothing and open, to just about everything. But when you start listening to the stuff that he talks about, the JFK stuff and the evidence that's put forward, like again, prime example, if somebody pulls out a gun, and I don't care if the president's moving or not, if somebody pulls out a gun and shoots them, that's it. There is no loose ends. It's there, done, dusted. But how did they know where he was? How did this happen? Why did this happen? Then this conspiracy of the grassy knoll and et cetera, et cetera. You know, then you get to the point of, Area 51. And Jesse basically goes out to Area 51 and he starts walking in that direction. And he is told by his guide that if you keep walking along this path, you're going to be shot. And there are people up there, there are armed guards that are going to shoot this 60, 70-year-old man. When he starts asking questions about it, he now lives off the grid in Mexico. And his show will not be published by any major network anymore. He is really, really prohibited of actually being able to do stuff. And then you start asking the question, why is all this conspiracy there? And even here in the UK, down to Princess Diana, down to, I mean, part of my novel series, and I won't share too much about it because it's sort of under wraps at the moment, but there are a couple of very specific things that I found with British history that literally free people who have been dead, one of them for several 800 years, that is still believed to have committed atrocities. One that was in sort of in line for the throne, and people believe he did this horrific thing. And I'm thinking, okay, so then it's not just enough to go that direction, say, well, he didn't do it. You've got to present the evidence. How do you know he didn't do it? What actually happened? What was going on? And I think when you can do that, that's when at least you've got something to share. That now the problem is there are so many books that are written about, look, he didn't do it, stop thinking he did it. But the problem is the mass media, the mass consensus, the mass populace, they all still believe the lie, as it were. And it does, it gets to a point then where you just like, you can either go through your life where you question absolutely everything and it's exhausting, or you get to the point where you're just like, I just have to live my life, present what I know, which is my time here, and that's it, and put the rest in the hands of God.
Definitely, man. The waters of information are extremely muddy
Yeah,
nowadays. So as you said, you can definitely get yourself
deliberately so.
lost in these
Yeah,
rabbit. Yeah, deliberately so.
yeah,
Absolutely, exactly. There's always an opposing view, whether it be real or fake. People say that there's three sides: my side, your side, and the real
yeah,
side. But I think there's more like 100 sides of every story. So many aspects of it,
yeah.
and this does go back to sort of the conditioning and the programming. And so, as somebody who works professionally, on behavioral mental health, how do you find that this type of programming, or any type of programming for that matter, that we get in the Western world affects people's mental health?
Unbelievably so. You just look at social media now. So there's two areas that I, again, talk about a lot when I do these shows and I get asked these questions. The first one is anxiety. Anxiety is probably the easiest problem, in inverted commas, to actually deal with. The second one is the whole idea of transgender. You can even further it if you want. But, the reality is there are more people now with anxiety than ever before. Why? The answer is really simple, because the media got on it and they said, oh, everybody's anxious, everybody's anxious, everybody's anxious. Guess what? Within a year, people believed that they were all anxious. You know, Morgan Freeman, when he was asked, how do we get rid of racism? He said, simple, stop talking about it. If you stop talking about anxiety, if you stop talking about and stop popularizing, these conditions that are fake conditions, people will have massive reductions in anxiety. Again, you can go and read it in my book, The Battles We'll Face, Hope in Times of Uncertainty. It's on Amazon. You know, First chapter, we talk about this straight away. Anxiety is nothing more than the fear of the past, fear of the future, fear of what has been, fear of what could be. It is something that we create ourselves. How do I know this? Because as a student of psychology and the brain, which I've done with MIT, Yale, and Stanford, just to name a few, so you don't sit there and think, well, this is Johnny come lately, doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. Actually, those are three of the most prominent universities in the world. The reality is we are not born with anxiety. There is a tiny, tiny chance that you may have an anxiety strand somewhere in your DNA. But to have it to the levels that people have now is ridiculous. And people literally believe that they have anxiety. So therefore, as we said before, as you sow, so shall you reap. If you believe you have anxiety, guess what you're going to get? Anxiety. And then you've got the kids, unfortunately, that turn around and say, oh, well, this is normal. This is normal. BS. It's not normal. It's not normal to literally be perpetually fearful for no reason. Are the things that contribute to it? Of course, social media. And a big part of that is the people that you follow. Again, the five people who I won't mention, but sort of five of the top influencers on the planet who thrive on making you feel like garbage. And you take that and you say, well, if I'm not a multimillionaire, I'm a brokey. And you get to the point where you actually say, hang on a second, where did this come from? It's like the idea of lack. People believe in or someone came up with the idea of lack and everybody else bought into it. There isn't lack on the planet. It's that people, again, believe that they have lack. A lot of it is down to your beliefs and your knowings. And people, again, if you don't believe what I'm saying, look at your life, look at how you're living, look at what's going on, and then compare it to where I'm at. Okay? Changing these small things, there's your comparison right there. When you change what you believe about yourself, you will see change in yourself. It is literally, and I know it is that simple. It takes work, it takes effort. But I think literally, I'm using the word literally here a lot, apparently, but this is the reality that a lot of people are conditioned with. They're not bothered about, the old farts that are, approaching 50, 60, 70, because they'll die off at some point. The sort of powers that be are looking to target the children, the ones they can condition, the ones that they can get in school and say being a drag queen is normal. Child masturbation at 4 and 5 years old is normal. It isn't. Literally, I forget, I think it's 72% of the population, if you are female, is now going for transgender or realignment surgery or whatever. Where the heck's that come from? So again, and that's something that I studied in depth, again, to be qualified to speak about it. You are being conditioned more than what you think. And that is one of the biggest things I've found, not being in the system, not being on social media all the time, having the ability to have, to a degree, free thought and to choose what I think, to choose who I listen to. You don't have these issues. And this is where people, I think, really, really need to wake up. Now, the great thing is, it's unfortunate that it's gotten to this stage, but having a conversation last week about this, people wanted to let the LGBTQI movement go and have your Pride Fest and everything else. Fine, let's celebrate it. Hallelujah. Yeah, let's get it in the schools. Let's do this. They wanted to do that until a drag queen came in and literally said it's okay to fondle, a young boy's genitals, and that's acceptable, and for you to watch porn and everything else at 4 and 5 years old. Then all of a sudden the parents turned around and said, oh no, wait, we can't be having this. We can't be having this. Oh, because you woke up and you suddenly decided this isn't right. So, it's like, how many times do people need to, it's like the lemmings scenario. It's like the lemmings only turn around when they suddenly wake up and recognize, wait a second, why are we throwing ourselves off the cliff? Do we realize what's going on? Oh, it's more conspiracy theory until it's proven true. There you go.
Yes, yes. A lot of that has to do with, as I've heard, I think it was Joe Rogan who
Hmm.
described it as this, as an information diet.
Yeah,
It's like if you go out and you eat a bunch of McDonald's all day long, you're going to have gut problems.
yeah,
If you go out and you only take in a certain perspective on information, you're going to have other problems.
correct.
And this goes along again with the conditioning, with the programming. It's almost as if you're being taken on a ride, on a roller coaster, and you're just flying at 100 miles an hour,
Yeah,
and you're not focused on saying to yourself, "Wait, maybe I should stop here and
yeah.
take a look at what I'm doing, take a look at what I'm believing, and maybe take a look at the opposing side,
Hmm.
and see if there's any way that I can adjust my frame of reference here, because soon I'm going down that big hill, and if I go down that hill, there's no coming back
Yeah.
sometimes."
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think people need to do. I mean, the majority, it's not even a minority anymore, it's the majority of people who get gender reassignment surgery end up within, I think it's 3 to 5 years, turning around and saying, shouldn't have done it. Shouldn't have done it. And again, when it's happening at 13, 12, the youngest over here was 3 years old. Again, it is a sick scientific experiment. And people say, well, how on earth can you say that? What authority do you have to say on this? And I sort of rubbed my hands and I was like, again, because I'm sort of an authority on history. You look at the Victorian times, they had in the UK people that they would say, come on in, get a hot meal, we'll take care of you, off the street. What did they do? They performed brain realignment surgery on them. The facts are all there, folks. World War II was exactly the same. They took people in, oh, we'll take care of you. They performed sick scientific experiments on them. They did the same on human beings. They're doing the same now. And guess what? People are, and I shudder to use this thing because everybody's divine. Some are more divine than others, or more noticeably divine than others. But I genuinely believe that, unfortunately, the populace is almost like dumb animals. They just go along and they ignore it, they ignore it, they ignore it until it's irrefutable. It's in their face. Their children are being taken. This is happening. It's happening in schools. And then suddenly they wake up and they say, oh my goodness. And I think oftentimes what it is, it's almost like a test to see. I think COVID was a test to see how easy or easily manipulatable people actually are. When people start firing back, then it's like, oh, they're not ready for that change yet. We'll try it again in a couple of years. And then they fire back a little bit less. Oh well, maybe another 10 years, we will have molded them to what we want. Whoever this we is, I genuinely believe there are a lot of phenomenal governmental officials, a lot of great, politicians, but equally there is a group somewhere, and whether it's Bill Gates and his foundation or, whoever that has ill intentions for this world to try and condition them, and again, it could be, again, all fabric of, like we said, it could be a conditioned thing that people believe this because it's been voiced. Who knows? But the evidence, I think, is irrefutable when you start seeing what's going on.
Yeah, man. And I have to say, one of my favorite ideas to explore are paradoxes. And you just
Yes.
brought to mind the most challenging paradox ever, which is that all of these things that we're discussing, within the last few minutes, we've been discussing in like a negative sort of way. But then you just said, everyone is divine, everything is divine. So you can say that the World Economic Forum is just as divine as, the church, which
Mhm.
is a very hard paradox to grasp.
I think it's having that awareness, which is sort of the place that I'm at now, that if everything is divine and there is only one power to act, then A, who am I to question it? B, it means then that there is some infinitesimal, perhaps, plan that is working out before our eyes. Because again, and I forget who it was that spoke about this. It was certainly an older author, but basically, oh, it was Wallace D. Waddle, who wrote The Science of Getting Rich. And basically, he was saying when politicians are no longer needed, God will dispense of them. And then you start to wonder, well, the politicians are there for a reason. They open a lot of doors for us. The businessmen and women, they open a lot of doors for us. Again, if you didn't have them, what would happen? And then you start to really explore that. And then that's when you start to say, okay, Lord, I'm one little guy, doing what I'm doing. Um, you know, this is just what I feel, what I see. And it's literally, you know, you put it into the hands of God, and a lot of people say, well, that's a cop out. It's like, what else can I do? you know,
And honestly, I don't think that is a cop out. I think what that is a conclusion that has come to when you go to the deepest depths of
yeah,
what is going on here, when you
yeah.
really try to understand what this is.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, even looking at COVID, and people were absolutely terrified of that. And as I labeled it, the biggest social science experiment on the planet, and it was a social science experiment to see how quickly we can lock down the world. Guess what? They did it. 5G suddenly appeared. When there'd been so many protests about it. Don't let this happen. Don't let this happen. And all of a sudden, it appeared during lockdown. There was a lot of Bill Gates, again. So when you study this inside and out, and again, Rumi said this, and it's always stuck with me, never teach on something that you don't have firsthand experience in. So again, I didn't take the vaccine. I didn't take it because, again, companies like Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson were already being tried for malpractice and cutting corners and everything else, and forced to pay millions and billions and trillions, for doing this, that, and the other. And again, it gets hushed away. It gets hushed away. Oh, no, it can't be true. Can't be true. Now, I'm not saying that COVID didn't exist, But what I am saying is it was certainly expanded upon, shall we say, and I think made a lot more than what it actually needed to be, and put people in a perpetual state of fear. Well, guess what? People are easily manipulatable and easily controllable when they're afraid, and people do stupid stuff when they're afraid.
Absolutely, man. And, all of these things have, again, a massive effect on social, cultural, mental health.
Hmm.
And I guess my next question would be, what do we do? How in the world do we recover? And how do we, I don't want to say, for lack of a better word, how do we fight this?
In terms of, be a little bit clearer. So what is it that we're fighting specifically?
We're fighting the overwhelming force of negativity, programming, and cultural influence that causes anxiety and mental health disorders on a scale that has never before been seen in civilized, situations. So, how do we sort of recover from that, and how do we combat just these forces that seem colossally powerful?
The answer to that is really simple. First, first of all, before I give the answer away, because I just feel it bursting out of me. But the answer is really simple. I would suggest that people become analytical, start exploring why we've got this sudden anxiety spike, this sudden, transgender spike, this sudden fear, this sudden whatever. What paradigms, what dynamics, what demographics have shifted that have happened never ever before? What has been introduced into our society that wasn't there before that's causing all of these things to happen? That's where I would start. Now I know the answer to that. To answer the question in a very simple way, turn off social media when you don't need it. Majority of people don't need to be on social media. Turn off the news because it's manipulated. It's often garbage. It's often one point of view that has been manipulated to a degree, sodomized to put out a point of view that is largely negative. I can't recall, even on American TV, even here in the UK, even on Canadian, Australian, New Zealand TV, anything in the last 30 years that I can think of straight off the top of my head that has been positive. You know what the news used to be, don't you? When it very first came out, it actually used to be here in the UK a way for the general public to understand and learn what was happening with the royal family. That's what it was to report on. So the royal family is taking a trip to Buckingham Palace, or they're taking a trip to Windsor House, or wherever it is. And then they suddenly realized, wait, we're not getting views here. That advert that we put on about, some dog being lost, that got a lot of views. Oh, that's negative. Let's try and do this more and more. And the papers started to do this more and more. And then you realize that, again, people have been conditioned to respond to negativity. That's what social media is now. There was a survey or something that became public recently that the majority of people that blow up on social media are people who are controversial, who are largely negative, who are literally, you would spit on them. You wouldn't pee on them if they were on fire. This is a direct quote. Um, and it's the negativity that fuels what they're doing. So if you've got a happy post about, this will help transform your life, this will help change you, forget it about going viral unless you're pushing hundreds of millions of dollars behind it. But if you're an Andrew Tate that says, well, I go and sodomize women, I go and sleep with women, and just have them and do whatever I want, and I'm a multimillionaire, and you're this and you're that, and you're pathetic, or a Cody Sanchez or a Gary Vee or whoever it is, that does this, your views are blowing up. And you can see this happening. So if you're standing, for, to a degree, what's right and what you perceive to be true, then you have got to do it with the knowledge that you may not explode on social media. There are other ways and means of doing this and how you phrase the conversation, of course. But I think in order to get away from the anxiety, in order to get away from all of this stuff that people are battling, first of all, switch it off. Simply switch it off, because that is the sort of the there is a word for it in psychology, and it's gone out my head at the moment. But that is the sort of subject, that is the idea that has been introduced within the last 10, 15 years that has literally changed people's lives. You can go back and look at it through films. 50 years or in the 1950s, people were largely happy. People sat down for meals together. The 60s, they still did that, though a little bit less. The 70s, the 80s, more wars started happening, more fights started happening. What happened? Well, you've got people now that are being conditioned in the 1980s by TV, by film. Games were starting to come out. And now, obviously, 30 years on, nearly 40 years on, that has been one of the biggest areas that hasn't been explored as to contributing factors for all of this stuff going on.
Yeah, and I even think about myself where, when I look at my sources for news, which are not mainstream, I mean, sometimes I'll sort of pay attention to what the mainstream is pushing just so I have the idea.
Yeah,
But, even my news sources, if I'm seeing something that is negative, that is promoting my engagement because we as humans, we do want to sort of see that
yeah,
negative aspect of it, which is a very interesting part of it. Again, it kind of goes back to the information diet. Um, but what I, at least in my experience, from what I try to do is it it seems to really help and contextualize the negativity that I am sort of seeking out, admittedly, by having a very strong spiritual foundation. And you talk about a belief versus a knowing, and what I have experienced has given me from what I can see as a knowing, a foundational knowing that the universe, God, all of this thing, it's all love, it's all about compassion, and it's all perfect. Because when we talk about divinity, when you think about what God is, what God feels like when you do connect with it, or him or her, whatever you consider it, it is literally perfection. That's what it is. So if the whole universe, if the whole world, if all of everything that we can see, hear, feel, touch is perfect, then to me it's like a nice healthy foundation of how I'm going to ingest all this negative information that's coming my way.
yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, there are times even now when I look at it, where I'm just like, how on earth? And then I remind myself, sometimes after I've ranted and raved, it's like it's not your place to, I mean, you used a word there in jest. That there's a spiritual teaching that came from the East, as pretty much all of the worthwhile spiritual teachings have done. And it literally is have the power and the knowledge to observe a situation, but don't feel that you have to take on board the emotion behind it. So literally, you watch around the room and you choose what you engage with. And like we said before, when you realize that you choose it all, if you're in poverty right now and you're staying there, you're choosing it. If you're in a horrible marriage right now, and I don't care the situation again, and I can say this because I've been there, and I say it with the most utmost empathy and respect. But ultimately, you have to know you are choosing this, and the amount of people that I've said that to that has given them the confidence then to say, you know what, I am, and I'm better than this. I don't need to accept this. Absolutely. But for me, I mean, I genuinely, I see very little that goes on in the news. I see very little that goes on in the world, to be honest with you, because you know it's when people say, human beings are God's highest form of creation. I still have a hard time with that. I still laugh. That's a whole nother conversation, because I don't necessarily see human beings as a lot of other people do, I think. And it is a very interesting journey for sure, and it's a very bold thing. I think a lot of times in people's minds to say that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Are we? I think, again, that's another paradox to me. It feels like we are, but we aren't at the same time. There are aspects of us that are, divine beyond what we can perceive, and divine, beyond what we can see in other living things. But then there's other aspects of us that are just far down in the depths of darkness. But again, I use the word paradox a million times in this
Mhm.
podcast today and other days. But it does seem to be one of the one of the ultimate paradoxes of, light and dark, good and evil.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
has to exist without the other. It can't. So it's just one of these grand, very, very complex problems that we have to try to work out in our life.
I don't even know it's necessarily a grand and complex problem. I think it literally is everything is divine, and I think just will listen to you, Josh. Um, I think it's to sum it up in simple. Everything's divine. Everyone has the power for ultimate good or ultimate evil. But I think the majority of people on the planet don't realize that everything's divine, or if they do, they don't believe it. They don't believe actually what they are capable of, for better or worse. Because again, going back to what we talked about in sort of the second part of the conversation, they've been conditioned that way. It's like if you keep an eagle in a cage for long enough, the whole world when it's released seems like a really big place. And I genuinely believe that a lot of people are conditioned to be poor. A lot of people are conditioned to be miserable, to be anxious, to be whatever, you know, and they allow themselves to be as well.
Definitely, John. And as we start to come to a close here, I just want to say that I really, really appreciate your views. I appreciate your experience, everything that you've learned through all of your spiritual experiences, and everything that you've shared with us today. I just want to say I really appreciate your time and your perspective.
Thank you. It's genuinely been a blast. It's super cool because all the different shows that I get to do, everyone is different. And it's super cool to sit and talk about these things and really hash them out more than anything else. And if nothing else, hopefully it makes people think a little bit more.
Well, it's definitely made me think, man. And just as a final thing here, can you just share everywhere people can find you, books, products, services that you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll begin. If you're looking for artwork, of course, whether it's pets, portraits, landscapes, seascapes, we do that. That's certainly a big part of our business. Also, if you're an artist, author, musician, or coach, looking to take your business from where you are to where you want to be, then do get in touch because in January 2024, we're taking brand new clients on. The place is limited to 16 to work with me one on one. We are looking to do a weekly Zoom call that will be for a much bigger audience at a much lesser price. But if you're looking to work with me one on one and have the benefit of the experience, then do get in touch. There's a number of other things that we've got going on, of course, and all information can be found at thejohnmorris.co.uk. And if you're interested in checking out my best-selling book, The Battles We'll Face, just head to Amazon.
Perfect. Thank you so much, John, for joining
It's
me
a
today,
pleasure.
man. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it and look forward to doing this again with you.